We know that Simple and ZywOo are some of the best CSGO players in the world, but how can we accurately compare them? When we play matchmaking, most of us calculate our kills to deaths or KD ratio to somewhat understand our performance. But when talking about pro players, most of the time we talk about a very different and particular number, rating 2.0. Rating 2.0 is a number calculated by HLTV.org to evaluate a player's performance on a map. We can also take someone's ratings from multiple maps over a period of time, like a whole best of 3, a whole tournament, or even a whole year, and use the average to judge performance over a longer term. But how does rating 2.0 work, and how is it any different from KD ratio? First of all, KD ratio can have absurdly high and low values in some games, making it basically useless. For example, in a 16-1 victory over Complexity at the PGL Major Antwerp, ZywOo had 0 deaths, making his KD ratio infinite. ZywOo is pretty good, but not quite infinitely good. But what about a closer game? Let's take a look at the performance of Brokey in FaZe vs Astralis at IEM Cologne 2022. On the first map, Brokey led the scoreboard with 28 kills and 18 deaths, giving him a 1.56 KD ratio. On the second map, he had 18 kills and 12 deaths, giving him a similar 1.5 KD, but ultimately, he was not as noticeable or impactful. There has to be a better, more universal way to evaluate Brokey's performances on these two maps. In 2010, when CS 1.6 was still being played, HLTV came up with Rating 1.0 to address the problems of just looking at KD. 7 years later, HLTV introduced Rating 2.0 with an improved formula. Think of it as the HLTV secret sauce. So, how does it all work? First of all, Rating 2.0 is not an absolute measure of a player's skill. What it shows is how much better or worse a player is compared to the average of 1. For example, in the FaZe vs Astralis match we mentioned earlier, on map 1, Brokey had a rating of 1.41, meaning he had a great match as he performed much above the average, whilst his rating in map 2 was only 1.09, close to the average. Despite his KD being similar, we can tell he played much better in map 1. So how do we come up with this number? Rating 2.0 consists of 5 sub-ratings. For the most part, they are pretty self-explanatory. First, we have kills, survivals, and damage. You also have impact rating, which includes multi-kills, opening kills, clutch wins, and a few additional factors. And KAST rating, which includes kills, assists, traded deaths, and surviving. All of these ratings impact Rating 2.0, but they also exist on their own, and you can check them out on HLTV.org separately for each player. All of the sub-rating values are calculated on a per round basis. What this means is that if you had 30 actions in 20 rounds, that rating will be 1.5. You might have noticed that multiple factors are accounted for several times in Rating 2.0. All of the components are weighted differently in the calculations, so that we have a balance between stats that lead directly to winning rounds, like kills and damage, and stats that have a less impactful but still consistent contribution, like KAST. Now, let's take a look at the PGL Major Antwerp final and compare KD to Rating. As we can see, in some cases Rating 2.0 is barely different from KD, but in some cases it flips the assessment of someone's performance from negative to positive. Despite Carrigan's worse KD, he had a higher rating than Rops because he had a higher ADR and impact. Another example is Boomich, who had a poor game and his KD ratio was much worse than Simple's, but thanks to his KAST being on par, his rating was just 0.16 below. But the most telling example is Rain versus Brokey. Their fragging performance was similar, But if we look at sub-ratings, we'll see that Rain was superior in terms of impact and damage. These are the markers of the incredible performance he put in, which earned him the major MVP. So, what rating value is good and what rating value is bad? The higher the better is the core principle of Rating 2.0, but the judgment on every value is contextual. The very basic context is sample size. A rating of 1.22 for a map is decent but nothing special, whereas averaging the same rating for a whole event or even a year is much more impressive. The competition in which someone played should be taken into perspective as well. In 2021, while participating in the Academy League, m0NESY had an incredible rating of 1.36. Even higher than Simples in that year. But in 2022, after joining G2, m0NESY's rating dropped to 1.12. It's the strength of the opposition that made the biggest difference. There are things that the HLTV rating doesn't take into account. For example, 3 frags in a gun round and 3 frags in an anti-eco round would have the same value to someone's rating. Rating 2.0 is not intended to be the ultimate evaluation of a player's performance. It's just intended to be comprehensive enough so that we can get a better idea of how pro players perform map to map. We believe it's always best to watch the matches for yourself to get the best assessment of how a player has performed. And all of those matches can be found over at HLTV.org. Make sure you check us out if you're new to competitive CSGO. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos just like this one. And until next time, thanks for watching.